Hello, my name is Nick Williams, and this is my Induction Culminating activity. I'm a ninth grade English teacher at University City High School. This is my first year as a ninth grade teacher, actually, my first year as a high school teacher. I spent the first 2 years of teaching at a K-8, and I taught 7th and 8th grade English, so it's been a wonderful journey at this high school. This school has an amazing team, lots of support, lots of enthusiasm, lots of energy. Here's a couple of pictures of my classroom. I am in sort of what they call the humanities neighborhood at the school, so that's where all of the English and history teachers are located. We are all in ancient 30-year-old bungalows, but we have made it very homey in there. I've put a lot of plants, brought in a lot of art pieces. At the beginning of the year, we actually had to move out of this classroom because our air conditioner broke, and we moved into one of the nice real building classrooms on the other side of campus, and all the students complained that it wasn't very homey, that it didn't really feel like an English classroom. So we were very happy to move back into this bungalow. Here's my inquiry question. How can I get students to improve their evidence interpretation to improve their writing skills in the area of analytical writing? Even just reading that out and saying it out loud just now, I never thought that when I started this inquiry process that this would be my inquiry question, because it's so granular, it's so specific. I didn't think I would have the opportunity to really drill down onto something so specific with my students. So my inquiry question has to do with something called the tactic paragraph. A tactic paragraph is something that all of the teachers at University City High School use for analytical writing. Specifically, we use it to analyze an author's purpose with regards to a literary strategy that they use. So here is the tactic paragraph outline. As you can see, there's 6 sentences, T-A-C-T-I-C. T is for topic sentence, A is for analysis, C for context, T for text. T is important because this is where the students bring in their direct evidence from whatever piece of literature they're analyzing. And then interpretation, and then C, conclusion sentence. When I first brought this up with the students and showed them how to do this, it was, hey, no problem, we can do this. But then I started noticing when I was getting these paragraphs turned in that there was something really interesting happening, and it had to do with this sentence here, the I sentence, the interpretation. As you can see, the interpretation sentence links the evidence to the thesis. So this is really sort of the sentence that does the heaviest lifting in this paragraph. It does a lot of work. What I was noticing is that students were basically restating the quote that they selected in their own words, or they were rearranging the words. So it really kind of felt like summary sometimes, or it just felt like, that they were just really restating what the author was saying, just in different words. But really what the I sentence needs to do is it needs to take it a step further and show the student's own thinking about what that quote is doing in there, why they selected it, and why it relates to their thesis. The tactic paragraph is also really important at University City because, and anywhere else really, because you can actually write a tactic paragraph as a standalone paragraph, just analyzing one particular quote, or as students move on further in 9th grade into 10th grade, they can actually use the tactic paragraph as body paragraphs in a larger 5-paragraph essay. So you can have an introduction, 3 tactic paragraphs, each one dealing with a different quote, and then a conclusion. So the tactic paragraph really is the foundation of the analytical writing. So it was really critical for me that students understood how to do that interpretation piece, because it really is the most important part. So we tried a couple of things on. The first thing, through direct instruction on the interpretation sentence, students were given various tools to get away from summarizing the evidence they found in the book. So one of the ways I did that is I did a big presentation on the tactic, and I really broke down every single element of the tactic paragraph. This is when I brought in mentor texts. I was able to get a lot of tactic paragraphs that students did in previous years. I got those from other teachers on my campus. I also wrote a few tactic paragraphs of my own, tried to make them aspirational, not perfect. And they were just really good examples to show, okay, in this situation, this tactic paragraph looks like this. In this situation, it looks like this. The other thing that I did, which ended up being the most important part, is I did a presentation just on the interpretation sentence. The whole theme of this interpretation was under the surface. So I told students that when you look at the ocean, you sort of see just the surface of the water, but when you get under the water, you see the coral and you see the fish, and that's really what the interpretation sentence is all about. Take what the author is saying and tell me what they're actually doing underneath that. The most important part of this interpretation presentation I gave them was sentence frames. I gave them a lot of sentence frames that would fit a whole bunch of different scenarios that they might encounter. The most important sentence frame I gave them was simply a frame with the word because. So the author says this because of this, right? So after because is really the student's analysis of exactly what's going on with what the author is actually doing. It really acts as a great fulcrum there. Students were so surprised to find out how simple it was just by inserting that little word in there, because. In fact, a lot of times I would just take their sentence as they wrote it, their interpretation sentence, I would add the word because at the end and then give it back to them. And they were able to come up with sort of the end of that sentence. It was extremely effective. Here's the growth and learning. So my focus class was my second period class, which is kind of my lowest performing class that I have of my 5. From that class, I took a cohort of several students and kind of tracked them throughout this process. The first time I tracked them was the pre-assessment. This was really after I gave them just the idea of the tactic paragraph. Here's the format, go for it, analyze, what the author is doing here. As a cohort, they scored about a 2.3. So this is standard-based grading, so the score is between 1 and 4, 4 being the best. These are just the scores of that sentence alone. I had a rubric for that sentence. So most students, they didn't do so great on it because they were just at this point giving a lot of summary. The next time I assessed this was an formative assessment, and this was an in-class on-demand tactic paragraph where they were exposed to a little piece of literature like an excerpt, and then they wrote a tactic paragraph on that. This was after I sort of gave more direct instruction about the interpretation sentence, and they ended up scoring about a 2.8. Again, a little bit below proficiency being a 3. This summative was actually a 5-paragraph essay based upon a novel that we read in class, and these are the scores just of the interpretation sentence. This was after I provided sentence frames, after I had individual writing workshops with students, after we had sort of a little bit of group work, of peer editing, students looking at each other's interpretation sentences, helping each other with what sentence frames to go in there. Also, a lot of students in my class relied on push-in support, which was also giving support for the interpretation sentence. After that was all said and done, they scored about a 3.04, which is right at proficiency. So they did come a long way. Most of the students did move the needle on that interpretation piece. For me, professional growth was really outstanding. I learned a couple of things that I'm going to take with me for the rest of my teaching career. The most important thing I learned was to slow down. Since I taught 7th and 8th grade English for 2 years, I thought, oh, hey, I know the curriculum. I know exactly what students are coming in knowing. Well, that's not true at all. Teachers are all different and they teach different things, so I can never assume what students know and do not know coming into 9th grade. I feel like in 9th grade, I'm really there to sort of like fill in the gaps of knowledge so that they can move on through high school. I also learned to anticipate common problems that will come up with learning a skill. So here's a real good one. Next time I teach the tactic paragraph, I know that I'm going to front load the information with explanation of the interpretation sentence because I already know that that's going to be an issue, right? And there are several other things that came up throughout the year that were problems that I did not anticipate that I will now know to sort of front load my instruction with. I also learned to be agile and to mold my learning experiences to student needs. I mean, even across class periods. Some of my class periods didn't even need the extra instruction on the interpretation sentence because they kind of just got it. It's just funny how it works that way with different groups of people. Reflecting on my inquiry, I really enjoyed having a focus student and a focus class. I really want to start considering all of my 170 students as focus students. It's just a really good way mentally to think about it, to track their progress through the year. I also learned that data is important, but it does not show the whole picture. Interpreting where students are at is more than numbers on a sheet and more about understanding where students are coming from, right? We can collect all this data and sort of track them over time, but students are all individual and they all have their own brains working in their own heads. So it's really important to sort of look past data at times. But by far the best part of my inquiry was my mentor. I was able to get all of my burning questions answered. Also, I was able to get real time help from a seasoned professional. My mentor, Amy, was just the best. My first 2 years of teaching, I really didn't have a lot of people to go to for help because I was the only English teacher on campus teaching secondary. So I was kind of relying on TikTok and YouTube videos, basically. So it's been amazing to have somebody with so much experience help me out. And then finally, my inquiry question and the way I was able to get to the bottom of it through data, reteaching, and other avenues showed me that this slow down approach can be adapted for a variety of issues that might come up in the future, right? So my inquiry was all about the interpretation sentence with regards to analytical writing, but really the same procedure can be used to help with reading comprehension, vocabulary acquisition, or any other skill that needs special attention. Just breaking it down into cohorts really helped me. Focusing on a focus student really helped me to see exactly how I can track the progress of a given skill over time and what I need to do to adjust my teaching in order to get them to proficiency on the skill that they're learning. And that is it. Thank you so much. It's been a great induction year. We have one left. Can't wait to see what that's all about. And I am so excited to do ninth grade again at University City High School.